most of us are aware of the potential dangers of E. coli, but we probably don't know much more than that. Today, we are going to learn a bit more about this from someone who is researching for better ways to protect us from this. Joining me today from Lethbridge is Dr. Kim Stanford, a research associate at the University of Lethbridge. Kim, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So first of all, congratulations on receiving the funding for your research from Alberta's new Results-Driven Agricultural Research, or RDAR. That fund, which is wonderful. How long will this enable you to continue your studies?
This is for 2 years of funding, and it will let me complete some projects that are already in progress from when I worked with Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. So it's fantastic. Like they're ready. Like they've had to be postponed a little bit with all of the changes, but this will let us finish these quite a number of projects off.
Excellent. Now, can you explain what exactly E. coli is and why it can be harmful for humans?
E. coli are bacteria, and we have E. coli in our digestive tracts. All mammals do, and we need them. So most of them are really good, but there are a few of them that have some other virulence factors that can make us really sick. So there's just a few bad ones. Most of them we need them. The bad E. coli, the pathogenic type, they make humans very sick, but cattle are not sick. So cattle can carry these quite without really being any way to tell. And then from cattle feces getting into the water or into food, then that can lead to people becoming very, very ill and possibly dying.
Right. So your research is obviously very important. Now, I understand that your research also involves investigating cattle feed and other foodborne pathogens to improve the detection and control of pathogenic E. coli. So can you explain this? Is there E. coli present in cattle feed?
No, no, generally there's not. Some of the research that was funded was on feed-borne pathogens, and that would be ergot. So ergot is a fungus that is grows in cereal grains, and that can make cattle very sick. It can make humans very sick as well, but grain for human consumption would be cleaned of ergot, and that sort of the cleanings, the screenings, things like that would then be directed to cattle feed. So there's more ergot growing all the time, and so there's more ergot contaminated grain. So the work there is to try to figure out simple ways to make the ergot less toxic, or how much even can be fed to cattle without before they causes them problems.
So what can ergot do? What kind of problems can it present in cattle?
Oh, it has a wide variety of effects, which can make it quite difficult to diagnose that it's actually an ergot problem. But one of the main things it does is cause blood vessels to constrict, which can reduce blood flow to the extremities, so like the tips of the ears or the tail or the hooves in cattle, and that can cause gangrene and necrosis. So the whole hoof can slough off, which is really horrible, or they can have like very small ears, or like the tail is broken off. So it can cause them considerable pain. It can also do things like cause what looks like pneumonia, but really isn't. So it can get into the lungs. It can affect reproductively, where cows won't produce any milk at all, like zero milk production after they've had a calf. It can reduce the cattle won't eat the feed. They'll say, "Oh, I'm not going to eat this stuff." So then reduce growth rate, and it can, if bad enough, it can kill them too. If they get high enough doses of ergot, it can cause death.
Yeah, it sounds like a very serious problem. So how does this ergot even get into the cattle feed, and what exactly is ergot?
Well, it's a fungus that is producing, and the fungus comes through the air and goes when like barley or rye grain. Rye is particularly vulnerable to ergot. When it's flowering, then if the fungus is passed through on the air, it gets into the flowering grain, and instead of producing a kernel of grain, it'll produce this purplish black, looks kind of like a great piece of grain, but it's actually a ball of fungus, and that's an ergot body. So when it produces that, then the ergot body contains some alkaloid poisons that then can lead to the bad effects to cattle or people if we were to consume ergot, which used to happen before we got like increased food safety and grain processing. That used to happen more frequently probably than we wanted to.
So through your research, are you finding some promising methods of reducing ergot in cattle feed then?
Well, we're just trying to find, first of all, how much ergot is safe to feed cattle before they will start showing any sort of negative effects to their growth or welfare. Like we want the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they have legislation of how much ergot can be in feed for cattle. In Canada, they have this regulations, and they're currently reevaluating them because some of these, well, the regulations, I'm not quite sure how they developed their present regulations. I don't think there were a lot of scientific studies that they could even draw upon. So we're doing a series of studies to try to better define what the allowable limit for ergot in feed should be. And then the other aspect that we're working on is to try to be able to detoxify the ergot just with some simple processing treatments that the feed industry could use. So we're looking at things like heating the grain, or pelleting, or heating and pelleting, and with those different combinations, looking at alkaloid concentrations after these treatments have been done to see if it's possibly making reducing the alkaloid concentrations and making the feed less toxic. That's the hope. But we'll be doing the animal feeding study for this ergot trial will be in the early, late summer is when we're planning to start that. So that's still coming. We've just been doing the heating and the pelleting and finding different sources of ergot from here in Alberta or in Saskatchewan. We've also got some other ergot samples, and then trying to find really very different ones so that we could try the heating and pelleting and see what happened then to the grain.
Interesting. Now, Dr. Stanford, another project I understand that you're working on alongside of Alberta Health Services is looking at the relationship between human disease and persistence in the environment of pathogenic E. coli shed by cattle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, cattle can carry. They have a really diverse population of E. coli in their guts. They're really a lot of different kinds. But the kinds of pathogenic E. coli that cause human disease are really much more narrow. There's only a few that when people get sick, it's only a very much more limited group. And so with this study, we're trying to be able to better predict when the E. coli that are being carried by the cattle are going to cause problems with humans. Because right now there are some fairly standard tests that are done on to say, okay, this looks like a pathogenic E. coli, but still that's not a really good prediction if they're going to make people really make them ill. So we're hoping from this to be able to look at there's some other researchers in Germany that are part of this study, and they have found some information where if they can find isolates of E. coli that from cattle that really persist in the environment, like they stick around for a long time, that those ones are in Germany are the ones that they think are more likely to cause human disease. But they were looking at different types of E. coli, and it's very much the pathogens are very much related to the location. It's very location specific. So the work in Germany, we may not find the same thing here at all, because there's different evolution going on, and even just different groups of pathogenic E. coli present at different locations. In another study we did, we were looking for some different groups of pathogenic E. coli, and one type was very rare. We could only find it in cattle that were coming from moose jaw. So moose jaw was a hotbed of this one type that was a well-known pathogenic type of E. coli, but we had a hard time finding it from samples anywhere else, from all over Alberta or anywhere else. So it's very location related, which makes it complicated.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that at all. Now, Dr. Stanford, when we think of E. coli, we normally think of cows, right? But I'm told that pigs can also get it, and this can present a challenge for farmers who raise both hogs and cattle in close proximity.
Well, pigs normally, when they get the pathogenic types of E. coli, normally the pigs get sick. Like quite often they get sick themselves. They're more like humans. But this Alberta has been quite unique in that there have been several recent outbreaks of pathogenic E. coli associated with pigs in the province. So this study is to try to determine, okay, are the pigs just picking up pathogenic E. coli from being around cattle, or has a certain strain of this pathogenic E. coli become adapted to pigs and can just now live in pigs, and it's nothing to do with cattle at all? So that's the goal of this study, because if you don't really know what is causing the problem, if you think, okay, maybe it's cross-contamination because cattle and pigs are being slaughtered together at the same slaughter plant, so maybe it's cross-contamination. You don't really know that it's coming from the cattle or it's coming from the pigs. It makes it really much more difficult to try to control. So that's the whole point. Well, major point of this study is to try to figure out, is it adapted to pigs or coming from cattle?
Okay. Now, can you tell us about the new podcast that you're going to be co-hosting?
Okay, yes, that's we're looking at sharing some science-based information on issues from the facing the cattle industry. And so the title of our podcast is "Cows on the Planet." And we'll well, it's all there are cattle here, and how are they affecting the planet? And um, we want to be. I'll be one of the co-hosts, and we will be interviewing various other scientists that are experts in particular areas, or other groups of specialists, like people like from Ducks Unlimited, or World Wildlife Fund, people like that. For we've got a whole whackload of podcast plan. It's a little bit daunting, even like I've never done anything like this before, so it's a little bit scary to jump in this and get going. But I've talked to some other agriculturally themed podcasters, and they say, okay, yeah, you just got to get in there and get going. And your first podcast is probably not going to be your best, but you learn to do by just getting in there and trying it. So,
I wish you all the best with that. Cows on the Planet. We will have to look out for that one. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Kim Stanford.
oh well, thanks for asking about my work. It's always fun to talk about.
Dr. Kim Stanford is a research associate at the University of Lethbridge. And I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.